Though we can't see what's going on exactly inside the Kremlin, we can certainly see what flies out of its windows. We can notice the many sudden deaths, the mysterious falls, the suicides that nobody believes were actually suicides. We know that these were not accidents. We know very well that these were warnings, but they're also indicative of something more grave, of something larger, of a silent purge that's playing out in plain sight. In Russia, there's a very standard rule that all the players know, which is that if you speak out, you will be disappeared. If you know too much, you will fall. And if you dissent, you will surely die. And that's why we all understand when we hear that a Russian oligarch has gone out of a window or drank the wrong cup of tea, what it really means. Because we also understand that this is not a new tool. This is just a revival of an old machine. A machine designed specifically to silence, to erase, and to eliminate. And it does it out of the public view, but in the public view. There's no trial, there's no headlines, just a name crossed out and a body found out of a window. Winston Churchill said it 78 years ago. The Kremlin political intrigues are comparable to a bulldog fight under a rug. An outsider only hears the growling, and when he sees the bones flying out from beneath, it's obvious who won. And today, we see a lot of bones flying out. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post, but I've also spent the past 20 years studying authoritarian regimes, including the Putin regime, and working against it. And what we're going to look at today is a fascinating topic. A lot of people do talk about the fact that, for instance, the transportation minister of Russia, Roman Starovoy, was murdered yesterday. But there's more to it. What does this mean as a whole? What is the bigger picture? What does this mean about not just Roman? What does this mean for Russia? What does this mean for the Putin regime? What does this mean about global events? Because it does. All of this has meaning. None of this is just in isolation. So let's take a dive into that. Let's look at exactly what happened to Roman and others, and why it is that Russia, so commonly in its history, seems to rely on this means of getting rid of problems. As Stalin said, no man, no problem. So do me just one favor. Please like this video and please subscribe. Consider becoming a channel member. My objective with this channel is specifically to inform others about the Putin regime and to support Ukraine. Because once more people understand the Putin regime, it becomes very clear why it must be stopped. And in order to do that, the best thing that we can do today is to support Ukraine. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at Roman. So there's a couple different reasons that he could have been killed. Now, of course, we'll never know the exact reason likely, but we can surmise a few things. One is that there's already a very public power struggle inside of Russia. The Russian intelligence service, which is called the FSB, is fighting with the Russian military. They're at each other's throats for a few different reasons. One, just historic, that's existed that rivalry since the Soviet Union. But today, there's a really strong reason. There's a really good reason. And that's Ukraine's unceasing drone attacks across Russia. These drone attacks have suspended flights, canceled thousands of flights. Flights are being diverted across the country. And this is hurting trade. This is hurting cargo shipments. But it's also hurting the government's ability to do business. If you cannot catch a flight in the government from one city to the other, keeping in mind that Russia is 11 time zones large, it really makes governance hard. It makes it hard for the military and for the intelligence service to carry out their work. So the military blames the intelligence service for the failures of why there's so many Ukrainian drone attacks paralyzing Russia today, creating total panic in the Russian population. And not surprisingly, the intelligence service blames the military. It goes back and forth. But the best way to find who's responsible with finding nobody who's responsible is to blame the transportation minister. He is in charge of the airports. He is the one that is supposed to find the solutions, and he hasn't. So scapegoat him. But there's another reason which is definitely worth noting. Now, Reuters accurately reported that he was being investigated for being part of a larger scheme to embezzle about $246 million that were meant to defend Kursk, Russia. Keep in mind, he had been the governor to Kursk, Russia before he was appointed to become the Minister of Transportation. However, the story leaves off a very important thing, is that Starovoy failed badly in Kursk, Russia, because very clearly it was not defended. The Ukrainians invaded it and they occupied it. So, after a record of failure, leaving your region to be occupied by Ukraine, and allegations of having embezzled the money that were meant for defense, why would he possibly get appointed to become minister? That doesn't make any sense. There must be somebody better for that job. Well, there's a very simple reason for it. Because when you're embezzling such large sums of money in Russia, like 246 million, you're not doing it alone. You're doing it in collusion with others. And who are those others? Well, undoubtedly, those others include people like the Russian military, the senior leadership, as well as political leaders in Russia who are supposed to be helping you to cover it up. Hence why they're able to get you a job as the minister in Moscow. That cut off all the investigations directly into him. But now that he was about to be freed from his position, he could be investigated again. And if he gets investigated again, he could get talk. He could say who else was involved in the corruption. And that's the corruption that the intelligence service would love to have because it's looking for a way to persecute people in the military. Keep in mind, the military in Russia is incredibly corrupt. As we've discussed before, consider this, it's now been, since 1991, an independent country, Russia. In the whole period of time, the military has been insanely corrupt. The lower ranks live in poverty, but the upper ranks have tons of money. In fact, the only way to move through the system is not by being a soldier scholar, by being an expert in military science. It's by covering up the corruption of your superiors, and your superiors task you to engage in other corruption. But as you move through the ranks, you do the same people that are below you as well. You get promoted if you help your superior to engage in corruption. And that's why we see the total lack of strategy in the Russian military, their total disaster in Ukraine. It's that they don't know what they're doing. They're not the best at the military. They're the best at corruption and embezzlement. So, how probable is it that Roman knew about corruption because he was engaged in it? It's quite likely. It's very high. Roman certainly would have known about that, which could explain why he committed suicide by gun in his car the day before they announced that he had been fired, which is another typical move of the Kremlin to announce something having already known it. They knew that he was dead, and then they fired him. They didn't announce he died. They announced that he was fired yesterday, and then a few hours later came out that he was already dead. It's quite clear what happened to him. Now, Russia does obviously have a very bloody history. That's pretty well known. We look back at Stalin's purges. Everyone's heard about the great terrors throughout the 1930s. Over 680,000 people were sentenced to death and executed. And keep in mind, that figure doesn't include the millions more who went to the gulags, the forced deportations, the starvation, and the extrajudicial killings that occurred. This is only the killings that occurred that were ordered, not extrajudicially done, or not people that are beaten to death during interrogations. And the Soviet Union, it liked assassinations. Leon Trotsky famously got killed with an ice pick for mountain climbing in Mexico City. When they do something like this, kill you with an ice pick in Mexico City, they do it because they want others to know about it. They want others to see that they eliminated the competition. They eliminated somebody who had ideas that were against what the leadership's ideas were. And that's different from what we see going on with other leadership. For instance, we know the FSB today engages in plenty of poisonings and going out of windows and heart attacks. And the reason that they do those sorts of things is there's a plausible reason they can give the public. Yes, it's very strange that somebody went out of a window. Now, very conveniently, when you go out of a window, if you had just finished beating the person or interrogating him to make sure that he didn't know anything or find out what he knew or with whom he had spoken, or to get passwords or PIN codes, you've just finished, let's say, beating him for half an hour. Then you throw him out the window. Well, an autopsy is going to say he looks very beaten, but it could have been from the fall. It's at least justifiable. It's something that can be believed. If you just kill somebody in a normal way, it's very hard to say that somebody just decided to stab themselves to death, though they do sometimes do that too. Look at Leonid Shulman, Gazprom, back in 2022. Multiple stab wounds. The Russians said that they found a suicide note. There's plenty of stories like that as well. There's plenty of stories of people like Alexander Subbotin, Lukoil, back in 2022, Well, he was apparently attending a shamanic ritual involving toad venom. Could be the case, but it could be more likely that they just killed him. They put something into his tea to make his heart stop, and then they had an elaborate backstory for it. But why do they do this? Why do the Russians rely so heavily on killing people? And this is fundamental to actually understanding how Russia operates as a whole. And I think actually the most important part of this video is that to understand this means, this very savage means of controlling information, you must understand that the Kremlin is no different than being a mafia. Russia today is a mafia state. Everything that occurs at Lukoil or Gazprom, the oil companies, though they contribute a huge amount of the tax revenue in the country, about 40%, there's more than just that. They've made incredible numbers of people, including Vladimir Putin himself, very, very wealthy. So if you're somebody, an accountant or a VP of Lukoil, why would they have to kill you? What would make that necessary? And the reason is very simple. You know too much. If you know how they're illegally trading in oil, or how they're washing the money, or how they're evading the sanctions, you pose a risk. Let's say that we used you for a period of time to engage in illegal things, whether it's the money laundering or the shipping of oil, but you finished that job, or we found somebody who could do it better. At this point, if you stay alive, you're pretty dangerous. You know a lot of information. You could be nabbed at the airport tomorrow by a foreign government who decides to interrogate you. You could decide that you're just going to access the accounts and take the money yourself. There's a lot of different things that could go on that'd be very bad for people with lots of power and lots of money. And just like the mafia that the government of Russia is, it just silences people. It silences people who could potentially be witnesses. Keep in mind, the Russian government today works with terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, works with rogue regimes like Venezuela. They worked with the Syrian regime. They currently work with the Iranian regime. They work with the North Korean regime. They are all very famous in how brutal they were. But those regimes also, like in Venezuela, worked with things like the drug cartels throughout Latin America. And all these different organizations, the drug cartels, the mafia, these governments are the same. They're criminal enterprises. And criminals only have one thing in common. They're out doing what they're doing for self-interest. They're not doing it for any greater cause. It's quite nihilistic. It's just to serve the purpose of immediacy today. What do I need to do today to improve my interest? There's no ideology. It's just greed. So when you see these murders in Russia, and it's something that we should definitely talk more about in the future, it's very indicative of, yes, there is a power struggle in Russia. The people that are getting killed is showing that there's something going wrong at the Kremlin. But what we always have to note is that it means something else. Russia is a mafia state, and Putin is the largest mafia boss that there is in this world. Thank you for watching. Please like and please subscribe. Thank you, as always, for supporting Ukraine.